Welcome to the MS Dev Show, episode number 189.
This is an episode in our special series recorded live from the Podcast Central at Build. We bring you the best guests for some of the best announcements. Raygun gives you complete visibility on errors, crashes, and performance problems affecting your end users. Replicate issues in seconds rather than digging through log files or having to rely on users to report errors or crashes. Raygun gives you a window into how users are really experiencing your software applications. Check it out today at raygun.com.
Okay, we are sitting down with Mike Harsh, Group Program Manager on the Windows Platform team, and our favorite guest, repeat guest, not favorite repeat offender, Scott Hunter, Director of Program Management for the .NET Platform. How's it going, guys?
Good. How you guys doing?
Yeah, we can get a new favorite guest, after this episode. Well,
it's actually awesome. This is like the last day of build, and all of our sessions are over, so it's really awesome now.
That's the best thing ever. They have mimosas over there?
I know. I have one right here.
There is no stress left.
Correction, there's some mimosas right here.
The bits shipped.
Sorry
the bits
about
worked.
that. I guess
demos all worked, so we're in good shape here.
Yeah. I was going to say, you guys got to be winding down, but you're probably getting pretty squirrely now.
Yeah, no, we're getting ready for, to put together another 8-10 hours of keynotes, just like Monday morning.
I'm doing a keynote in 2 weeks, actually, in Madrid, Spain.
There you go.
.NET 2018.
Awesome. So anyway, you guys are killing it. I mean, I think this is one of the big highlights of the show. This is one of the big things that people are talking about. And I think it's great because, in former builds, we always had here's this new, Windows feature, and the tech press would ooh and ah, and they liked getting a good story out of it. And people could sort of say oh yeah, I see what you're talking about. But this really is, to me, is the spirit of build, some of the announcements that you had, because this is helping developers at the core, helping them with productivity, helping them bring their code forward. So to me, that's what build is really about. So I think, you guys are really the stars of the show this year. So.
Well, I mean, one of the big things, and I said this at the beginning of our session yesterday too. It's really the, listening to what customers have to say and responding to their needs are our thing. That's the .NET team has been really awesome at traditionally, and a lot of teams in the Azure world are super great at. And in the Windows side, we're really excited to be kind of now working with Scott Gu and Jason Zander because we really get. We can now take a lot of the ideas and things that we wanted to do and really, respond to customer feedback, and we can now make that reality. And so it's really, just a total breath of fresh air.
Yeah. Because I know, one of the things, Scott, when you came up to me, you were like, hey, .NET 2.1, it has new HTTP client performance, and it's a 10x improvement. I mean, that's the stuff to me that's super cool. I wish that, that's, the tech press doesn't like to write about that, but that's the stuff that I think is really cool. And I think that's what developers get excited about. So.
I mean, that's the thing that traditionally with Joe's keynote sessions, right? It's pixels and consumer features, and that's of course what, like you said, the tech press likes to talk about. It's because it's easy to understand and get your head around it and visualize it, and it makes for good pictures and articles and things. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, if it's not powered by awesome software and easy to use for developers and kind of plug into for developers, it doesn't matter. And if you have to write a new app from scratch to use it, then it really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But I still think there's a really awesome story around .NET Core. Just kind of sum it up in my words, .NET Core 1 really brought that cross-compatibility, really kind of reset, what a vision of a framework could be. .NET Core 2 kind of filled in all the stuff that had to get dropped for the first version to come out. What's the story, in your guys' opinion, for .NET Core 3?
So .NET Core 3 came, we started talking, I don't know how long ago, Mike, it was. We were sitting there talking about, we have all these developers that build applications on top of Windows today, and in some ways, as you were just saying, we build a lot of new stuff, and that new stuff is great if you want to build a brand new app from scratch, but if you have lots of existing apps, and we started asking ourselves, how do we go take all these developers that have been on the bandwagon with us for a long time using WinForms and WPF and make them feel like they've not been left behind? And what I mean by that is, they already have apps, and all they want to do is they want to make their app work great on the latest platform with the latest high-res monitors and the latest Windows features. They don't necessarily want to rewrite the app from scratch just to go build the same functionality in some other technology.
Yep.
And so we started brainstorming it feels like about a year ago.
I think it was probably actually not that far from that.
About, what if we brought WinForms and WPF to .NET Core? That also makes those people feel good again because, we always are talking about the shiny new things, the UWP and the .NET Core. And if you're on some of the older tech, you might not feel like you're getting the same love from us, even though that's awesome tech. And so it's like, let's bring those things and those developers onto our brand new .NET Core platform and give them some of the benefits of .NET Core along the way.
That is super cool. So I just want to dive into that. Like, what does that actually mean? Because I know it. I've created WinForms and WPF applications a long time ago, and I know like people sort of do get stuck on that. So like, what opportunities do they have today now with these announcements?
The big things that you get, that's the big question in the room is, what do you get by moving your WinForm and WPF app to .NET Core? And if you roll all the way back, to, as you were saying, in .NET Core 1, we try to solve a couple of technical problems. And one of the things that our web customers told us is, hey, we have a server, it's got 30 applications. I want to take advantage of async await. That means I need to put 4.5 on the box. Hey, Scott, they actually called me. I get a phone call from some rep at Microsoft saying, hey, can you talk to company XYZ? And I'm on the phone with their people, and they're like, hey, can we install the framework? Can you guarantee us that all the apps are going to work the same? And my answer to that's going to be, there's no way I'm going to guarantee that. You need to build another server and put 4.5 on the other server and put the new app over there, and you can move apps one by one to see if they work. And so that was a core thing that we wanted to fix in .NET Core, which is you don't have to have one single machine global version of .NET. You can have as many side by side as you want, and then you as the developer or the IT group can determine what policy is, whether the apps can roll forward, whether the app sticks to the version, how you service it. And so that's also the same problem we find with desktop developers. If you're a WinForm WPF customer today, now that we're shipping Windows even faster, every 6 months you get a brand new version of Windows, which
With a brand new version of .NET.
which typically contains a brand new version of .NET Framework. Things might break, and so our customers quit breaking us. And so getting you onto .NET Core means you're not going to have, .NET's the .NET you're on is not a Windows component, which means you control the update cycle for it. You can wire an app to stay on a particular version. You can have as many side-by-side as you want. So we're giving you the same controls we gave the web developer. You get other benefits, too. You can have the choice of having a machine global .NET, or you can have an applicable .NET. So if you want to build a WinForm app and put .NET in the same folder as it, you can.
Okay.
Now, your first reaction might be, that sounds terrible. I'm going to have a 1.5 gig Hello World WinForm application. And that's not the case. .NET Core.
I would also
like
argue
3, really, right?
Yeah, I would also argue that, the space is cheap enough. Like that's usually like the last concern. Actually, is the space.
It's actually 3 gigs. 1 gig would be
obviously
1 gig would be pushing it.
Yeah.
Well, but to your point though, like that is some feedback that we've gotten from a couple customers we've talked to. Is like, obviously they don't want it to be huge, but it's like you said, they're like, listen, we have big iron we're throwing at this from a desktop perspective, and they have a bunch of disk space, and like, obviously they don't want to use it if they don't have to, but they have it if they need it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why there's only one .NET framework on a machine today. Is as the Windows group, we were trying to make Windows as small as possible because we want to run on as many devices and tablets and stuff like that. And carrying 5 .NETs around is not exactly the best way to do that. But as Mike says, when you go talk to some of these enterprise customers, they're like, we can solve the disk space problem. Don't worry about the disk space.
Yeah.
And so with Core, we'll enable people to have as many of these things as they want. But I was going to say, one of the demos we did on Monday and then again on Tuesday with Mike is we took a WinForm app, compiled it against .NET Core, and we have a linker. And the linker can basically, at this point, the linker we showed throws away any assemblies that you're actually not using in the application.
Really cool. Yeah.
And so we had a WinForm app with the Telerik control and .NET Core, and linked it was about 66 megs.
Awesome.
That's not doing hardcore linking though. We can link stuff outside inside of assemblies as well. So I think you're going to find that file size go down quite considerably after that. So that's the second benefit. The third benefit is what we call Core Effects. So Core Effects is the BCL that .NET Core runs on, and it is actually different than the BCL that .NET Framework runs on. They started in the same place. But .NET Framework, because it's that global thing and we can't break any compatibility, we really try not to touch that thing. Now, CoreFX, because .NET Core side by side, we're taking fixes that we would never have done ourselves because it's open source, which means maybe there's a bug that I never hits my radar because I've got 5,000 higher priority bugs in front of that. Well, now anybody in the open source community can go, I want that bug fixed, and they'll submit a pull request. And so we've got bug fixes in CoreFX that don't exist in .NET Framework. Same customers might go and say, this is slow, and here's a rewrite of this to make it go faster. Once again, that's in our thing. And so as part of our demo yesterday as well, we showed that this WinForm app, what it did is it basically scanned all the files in a folder and wrote a pie chart for each folder in each subfolder in the folder. And the perf, the .NET Core version was twice as fast, more than twice as fast as the .NET Framework version. And that's because the file enumeration APIs are just faster in Core. Also, we didn't show it, but those file enumeration APIs also work better. The ones in .NET Framework, if you enumerate all your files starting at the root of your drive, as soon as they hit a folder that's not accessible, it throws an exception. Well, that makes no sense. If you're trying to map your hard drive, how are you supposed to deal with the fact that it stops as soon as it hits something it can't see?
Yeah.
That's technically a bug. But I won't fix that bug because if I fix it, it's going to break the behavior of the... If you depend on that behavior... but in CoreFX...
They coded around it.
We actually fixed it. And so you're going to get a newer version of the BCL that's faster, has bug fixes in places that we would never change in .NET Framework. So you're going to get a better .NET, side-by-side, app local, .NET Core, linking, bundling. You're going to get a bunch of new stuff.
Yeah.
And this is the .NET that because it's side-by-side, we can change more.
Yeah.
So what happens, I take my application and, I retarget it so it's using .NET Core 3, but I have a bunch of dependencies that might not be updated. How does that work?
So with .NET Core 2, in that wave, we actually introduced something called .NET Standard 2. And it was not really a .NET Core feature. It was something that Mike's team worked on, my team worked on, and it was all about having a consistent set of APIs across all the .NETs. So we basically took all the .NET that was not UI code and made it the same across all the platforms, meaning that .NET Framework supported all the set of APIs, .NET Core supported this entire set of APIs, UWP supported this set of APIs, Xamarin supported this set of APIs. And so what that means is when we were done, roughly 75% of NuGet.org worked on
Start of the box.
on .NET Standard. The stuff that didn't work used UI. And so what I think you're going to find is the API compatibility in .NET Core is so good now, most of your code's just going to run.
Yeah. And a lot of that happened in .NET Core 2, right?
It did.
Yeah.
We added those APIs to UWP in that wave. We added those APIs to .NET Core in that wave. .NET Framework already had the APIs, and we added the APIs to Xamarin in that wave as well.
So basically, .NET Standard in .NET Core 3 is the way that you brought forward WinForms and WPF? Is that right?
Not those. We would not.
Okay.
We would not put.
okay, because
those.
Okay.
WPF and WinForms are Windows only components, so I can't make. You're not going to have WinForms on Xamarin. You're not going to have WinForms on some of these things, and so we only
Forms on Tizen. Come on.
we have Xamarin Forms on Tizen.
I don't think they're rocking the H-Wins on Tizen.
Well,
I don't think they are.
You got to leave stuff for next year.
But we don't put platform specific stuff in the standard. But what I mean by that is most of the APIs that any of your .NET code calls probably are there already. We also ship something that's coming in the .NET Core 2.1 wave called the .NET Windows Compatibility Pack, and that brings a bunch of the APIs that are Windows only as a NuGet package to core users. That things like system drawing, directory services. So I'm going to guess between .NET Standard 2, the Windows Compatibility Pack, I think your code's going to come and run for the most part. And if it doesn't, it's going to be changing a few lines of code, not changing thousands or millions of lines of code to make your app work.
That's very cool.
So the other question I have is, since WinForms and WPF, have been around for a long time. The project files have changed a bunch over the years.
Yes.
So how does, can you use the new style SDK style projects files with WinForms and WPF now?
If you retarget your WinForm and WPF application to .NET Core 3, you'll get the new SDK style CS Proj.
Awesome. And what other benefits do you get out of that SDK style projects that our listeners might not be familiar if they haven't done that?
The big things that we did in the project system that we call it the SDK CS project system, and we built it because as we were doing .NET Core 1.0, one of our core tenets back in the days was we want to enable anybody on any device to build a .NET application. That might mean you're on a Mac with VI. You're on Linux with Atom. Who knows what OS or what editor you're on? And we were asking ourselves, is it possible to build a .NET application from a regular text editor? At the time, the CS project system that we had for .NET projects required 300 or 400 lines of XML.
Yeah. Here's every single file
to actually make that thing work. And so we went to a simplified CS Proj that could be hand typed. That's one benefit of the new project system. The second benefit is, which Jason was hitting on, which is my favorite feature, is in the old CS Proj you have to have an item for every source file in your application. Well, in this world we're thinking of, I just want to go and add a new file to my project or in the folder with my code, and it should just compile up.
Yep.
And so the new CS Proj system will just pick up files in the folder automatically. Huge benefit to the customer is it means your CS Proj file doesn't change every time you add a file. You really see that when you do merges. It used to be that every time if you added a file to a project, if a developer pulls that code, oh, dang, my CS Proj needs to be merged, and it's going to be some ugly...
It could even be corrupt. It was really
so now you're only going to merge the file that you actually added in. So
that's awesome.
Those are two of the big benefits, but it really comes down to, as we were reimagining .NET Core and reimagining .NET, simple. We want .NET to be simple. It should be put files in a folder, run them. Not and by the way, nothing is wrong with the old system. In that era, everybody had Visual Studio. And we never even thought of what was in the CS Proj because it just took care of it for you.
Right.
But as you start trying to say we work both in VS and outside of VS, you can't have that complexity.
Yeah. I mean, even source control has changed in that time, right? I mean, just
quite a bit, yeah.
Like everything that we do has changed. So, I mean, it makes sense.
So one other comment I want to say about the project system that will be kind of, when you start to think about .NET Core 3 and applying this to client applications, one of the, Scott talked about retargeting. We're still, definitely... working with Scott's team, working with some other folks on the VS side to figure out what is the retargeting or upgrade or modification experience for an existing WinForms or WPF project to move to .NET Core 3, because obviously there's going to be a lot of project system changes like we talked about, and we need to make sure that apps can get across that chasm in a way that is smooth and awesome. But one of the other benefits you'll get once you're there is so right now if you want to use the modern packaging in Windows, that new MSIX format, you're going to have to use what's called a packaging project today. So that's kind of a standalone project that lives in the solution that you additional to your existing project. We want to make that just part of your WinForms and WPF project, so you don't think about like a click once, right? It's just another thing and so. That will be a thing that we can do once we have the new project system with .NET Core 3. But, we have to...
Once again, a simplification.
Exactly.
In the old world, as Mike said, last year with VS 2017, we added this new mechanism. So it used to be, to be centennialized, or whatever term you want to put this thing under, you'd have to go read Hanselman's blog. And there was a whole bunch of stuff and had a hand do that stuff. We made it better last year with VS 2017.
Yeah, the packaging project.
There's a packaging project, but it means you have your WinForm app, then you got to have another project that kind of wraps that project. Once again, as part of this SDK-style project system, we want to simplify this stuff, let you do it all by hand, which means you shouldn't have to have one of those things. And so Mike and I want to make this thing as simple as right-click, publish, check the boxes and stuff that you want, and boom, out comes your thing.
I want to make it easy enough that I can do it.
Well, I mean, you went back like one step, like to Hanselman's blog post. That was like just doing like the make AppX, but before that, you actually had to write an installer.
Oh yeah, I mean
to run it through Centennial to do it. So I mean, that alone has gone from very, very hard and technical to do, it's pretty good, but it's still that one extra step. And you're talking about removing that.
Yeah,
extra
I mean,
step.
it's one extra step, but it's also another thing that you really have to think about managing, right? It's another build process, and some of the mechanisms around how Centennial works, there's some wackiness there too, even with the packaging project. So.
Or do you even find it? I mean,
it's true.
To me, my biggest complaint about the current way it works, how do you know that you have to go add another project to your solution?
Well, obviously, you're avid readers of Scott Hansman's blog.
But if you go to Hansman's blog, it's going to be even worse. You're not going to see that. You're going to see here's how to go to CLI and copy
enough.
some XML, and good luck to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that blog post is there forever now.
It's there forever.
Yep. So one thing I wanted to ask about, too, that I saw that was announced was XAML Islands. So what the heck is that?
So XAML Islands is, so I'll give you a little, like a gestation of the feature, then we'll talk about what it is and the kind of motivation for it. So with the Desktop Bridge Centennial Desktop App Converter, pick your set, the people taking existing desktop applications and putting them inside of an AppX and starting to package ID so they can start calling a lot of the Windows 10 APIs. We would talk to customers and say, hey, you can start calling a bunch of the, WinRT APIs once you have a packaging project. And they looked around and they said, hey, that's cool, but like literally 50% of the APIs are UI.
Yeah.
Because, a lot of the things in the modern set are XAML APIs. And they said, why can't we use those? On the flip side, as we've been talking to Office about, their UI needs and building their applications going forward, like Office is targeting more and more different endpoints, right? They're building mobile apps, they're building web apps, they're building, obviously, their existing desktop apps, they're building some of their new apps in UDP. So they kind of have a suite of apps even on Windows. And so they've got some desktop UI and some UWP UI, and they're like, we don't want to build our Windows things twice. We only want to build our Windows UI once. Could you please help us, give us a native UI that we could write in C++ that we could host in our existing Win32 apps and in our UWP apps? And we said, boy, I think we have a thing like that. I mean, basically the UWP UI stack is effectively a completely native component that can bind with WinRT to any language format. And so like that became the kind of seed of what this idea of XAML Islands is. And so basically it's a new WinRT API that lets you take any XAML control, either a control that's in the box, a control that you build, or a third-party control, and expose it as an HWint. So then you can use that, and once you have an HWint, as you guys know, in Windows, Bob's your uncle, you can kind of party on it. And so,
party on the island.
That will let you host this control inside of. If you want to host it inside of Office, they're gonna start using some of these new controls as we're kind of designing the evolution of the Fluent UI system with them. But then we're also building some easy to use open source wrapper controls that inherits from the WinForms control base and the WPF control base to be able to use easily in WinForms and WPF. Think about it like Element Host, right? Like you have in WinForms for WPF. And then we're also, for the controls that we've had the most requests for, like WebView, like the Maps control, like the in-campus control, the media player, and of course the Swap Gene panel for DirectX hosting. We're going to go build controls that inherit from that base class that are specifically tuned for that scenario. So it'll feel very much like a native WinForms or WPF control. And we're going to do all that in a GitHub project, open source, and we'll have NuGet packages there. So you can play with these, you can see them, you can edit them, and kind of party on that.
So hopefully we can take that a step further than what Mike is saying, which is either we build a feature into Visual Studio or into NuGet packages where if a NuGet package contains controls, they just show up in the toolbox. Or we find a way to stick them in the toolbox for you in Visual Studio. Mm-hmm. What I really want is I want to say if you're a WinForm or a WPF developer, can't speak, you can just, a new section shows up in the toolbox, which is UWP controls.
That's cool. Yeah.
And you just drag right from there.
Yeah.
And Kevin showed an awesome demo on Tuesday about this that really resonates with me. He showed an old app, huge form on the screen. You fill a bunch of fields in, and when you're done, you press print. Then you sign it, and then you scan it, and then you email it. And that's the old school. If you bought a house or a car, that's kind of the way this stuff works, unfortunately. But he showed a demo where he killed the print button, and he grabbed a UWP ink control, stuck it in there.
Yeah.
And so then the workflow was fill the form in, sign with your finger, and press done. Mm-hmm. And you killed the print, you killed the scan.
Yep.
Because now, that's the power of, some of the benefits of the UWP controls are they're enabled for touch, and they can let you do inking and stuff like that. And that's a great way to modernize an existing WinForm or WPF application.
Yeah, I mean, your point about the toolbox too, like that, the goal behind those wrapper controls is really to make it obvious to use in the way that those platform developers would expect, right? WinForms, like you advertise things, new features show up in the toolbox, right? And that's so we want to make sure that things show up in the toolbox. So yeah, we're talking to the VS folks about figuring out how to get NuGet connected to the toolbox in a better way.
And this might be like a really stupid question, but I mean, it just sounds like this makes it really easy for people to transition as well, right? I mean, it's just instead of like having this cliff where they have to sort of jump off of it, they can. I know that they could use the APIs, but now they can start doing XAML. And I mean, just over time, I mean, they're just going to eventually be like, you know what? Like, I have 90% of a UWP.
And the thing that I guess for me, the magic of the UI widget island, whatever, like the section is it starts to unlock a bunch of new interesting composite scenarios. I mean, you could take it to one extreme and basically say like, I want, an app that's basically we're working on adding windowing APIs to UWP with, that we're making a solid first step in this year, but it's probably going to be another 18 months before we have all of the things that you could do in 30 years of windowing APIs in the new model. And so until then, what you could do is just take a WinForms app and to use the parlance of WinForms, because I worked on that for 6 years, you could dock fill basically XAML island inside of it and just do all your UI as XAML UI, but you can use the Win32 windowing APIs for doing all the windowing things you care about. And of course, because you're in just .NET, and that's the cool thing about XAML islands, it binds to whatever the .NET instance you're just using. All the types just work from a programming perspective. And of course, because you're in .NET, you have full access to every API in the desktop. You can p-invoke to anything. Like it's the kind of everything of everything, which is the thing that I like about the desktop, is there's really no limits. It's kind of
This reminds me of something we did in the ASP.NET team years ago. We called it One ASP.NET. And that's, ASP.NET started off with this thing called Web Forms. And then we added MVC, and we added Web API, and we added SignalR.
Yep.
And, nobody was going to just go throw their entire web form app away and do something new. But we enabled you to actually start adding some MVC controllers or Web API controllers to your existing application.
And that was huge.
It was huge, and it solved a lot of problems because and I hope this tech, if Mike and I are successful, what will happen here is you'll take your WinForm application or your WPF application, and maybe you build some new forms with XAML, and you call that good, and you can mix and match. Yeah. Use the tech that's best for what you're trying to build. Don't feel that you have to go change everything immediately.
I think what I was asking.
Yeah, I think the ideal endpoint would be, you've got a SDK style project, like, targeting .NET 3 or .NET 4, pick your awesome .NET Core version of the future, right? In the year 2000, there'll be flying cars and and .NET side by side. And you can then, in this project, go add a form or a user control of either WinForms or WPF or UWP, and just have those things just be very interchangeable and leavable, right? And that's just kind of the, why choose? Desktop is all about
So does that even include like the non-UI, like WinRT and UWP APIs as well?
Yeah, we have a decent amount of work to do just to make it so the underlying CLR support and .NET support for calling, a WinRT API from .NET is actually pretty solid. It works really well. The problem right now is getting it set up in VS is a giant pain, right? You've got to know where your SDK is installed. You got to go find that Union WinMD file. You got to go reference it. It's just it's not as streamlined as it needs to be, especially if you think about the WinForms audience, right? I mean, that's a type of developer that just loves simplicity, loves the tools to get out of their way and just really make it super simple. And right now we have quite a ways to go to make it. Again, once you've got the reference set up, it's really easy to use in code.
In my world, obviously, in my simplified world, if you saw the demo we did on Monday and Tuesday, in my CS Proj, there was a reference to Windows Forms, there was a reference to .NET Core. I would hope we just say there's a reference to Windows 10, and you're done. You don't have to go figure out something or where an SDK is. Or our job is to make .NET so damn easy to use that you want to use our platform because it's just simple.
Yep, of course.
Trademark.
And I mean, that was to me that was really the power and the magic of VB6 or earlier versions of VB and WinForms was it made it so simple that anyone was a developer, right? I mean, you just you fell off a log and hey, you're a Windows developer and you're using the UI in the right way, you're packaging the right way, right? I mean, no, exactly, it's mine too. And this is the history is I started life in college, doing Unix programming in C++, and I was toiling away. I was just to do the simplest task. And then you see VB for the first time, and you're like, oh my God, I've been doing it all wrong. Like, this is just, it's magic. It's not even programming. It's like arts and crafts time.
Right.
And it's fun.
Don't wait for users to report problems. Raygun gives you complete visibility on errors, crashes, and performance problems affecting your end users. Replicate issues in seconds rather than digging through log files or having to rely on users to report errors or crashes. Raygun gives you a window into how users are really experiencing your software applications, supports all major programming languages and platforms, and integrates with your current development workflow tools too. There's a free 14-day trial, and it takes minutes to implement, so start resolving issues in your application and check it out today at raygun.com.
I was at a customer dinner earlier this week, and I ran into a customer, and she was telling me that, yeah, we have 4 million lines of VB6 still.
Yeah.
And it works, and we're not going to change it because it works.
Did you ask her how many go-tos there were?
I actually know of a partner that has more than that, and they wanted assurances that that VB6 would continue to work on Windows 10, which of course it does.
Yeah, and could you imagine if think about the compatibility promises in Windows, right? Can you imagine if VB6 apps stop working? Right.
That is something I want to make sure we do talk about on the show a little bit. Is if you are a .NET Framework customer and you've heard that we've got this new .NET Core 3 with UI on it, what does that mean for?
Yeah.
Do you have to move your app to .NET Core 3? Is .NET Framework going away? Those are things that I want to make sure we address. And the answer to that is .NET Framework will never go away. It will still be installed as part of every Windows. Even Windows itself depends on it, so it's not like you can take it out. But our message to those customers, if you have existing apps, you should not feel you have to do anything. Our goal is to make .NET Framework that's inside of Windows break you less, which I hope this means is we'll do more changing in the .NET Core version and less in .NET Framework, which means the apps you already have built run great, will continue to run great, new Windows updates won't break them, and you'll be in a good place. If you want to modernize your app and take advantage of some of the newer APIs or the Windows 10 APIs or some of these things, size improvements, move your app to Core. But there's no requirement or no big, huge push to move to Core. All the XAML Island tech that Mike was talking about, that works in 4.x as well. So if you don't want to move to Core, you don't have to move to Core. You're still going to get some of the modern browser, the modern media players. Bring over some new UWP controls if you want. So we're just trying to not break that version of .NET as much as we have in the past. So it's going to, but that's really, we've been trying not to break it for the last 2 years, even though we still do. But we're going to try even harder not to break it. But you should feel comfortable and safe. That's not going to go away. The support lifecycle is not going to go. This whole conversation is kind of funny to me because we were chatting sometime earlier this week. It's like the VB6 runtime is still there. The ASP.NET, active server page runtime, that predates .NET is still in Windows.
ASP not .NET.
Yes. It's the Windows compatibility is amazing.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the times that the issues that we have, Scott mentions, we try really hard and we have great compatibility testing, but there's so many apps that enterprises have written that live behind the firewall, and we don't see any telemetry from those boxes. Yeah. We don't, we just have no data on them.
Even internal to Microsoft, I mean, we focus on cool things like .NET Core, right? And our internal systems, they don't get a whole lot of attention. So, I mean, that tends to be the case for sure. So I read that you guys took Paint.NET and migrated to .NET Core. Help me understand how that worked. And it turned out that it was a lot faster too. So I'm really curious how you did this.
So some folks inside the team, we don't actually have the source code for Paint.NET.
Right.
But through all the things we were discussing before, this happens to be the .NET Standard brings a bunch of APIs back.
Okay.
And putting WinForms and WPF on top of .NET Core brings those APIs back. It just happens to be...
So you just swapped out the platform then?
We just swapped the platform out and it just ran.
That's awesome.
So that's awesome because that's a very old application. That goes all the way back to the very beginning of .NET.
I mean, it's a big app.
And so, I'm sure that not all of that has been rewritten over the years.
Right.
So there's some pretty old code in there.
That's kind of the cool thing that we want to really tell people. This is not a rewrite your app. This is a retargetish kind of experience. And we've been taking... we took that app and we're able to move it over... Emo Landworth on my team has a bunch of internal tools, API Analyzer, API Portability Analyzer, and a variety of other tools. All of his tools just worked. So we've actually been able to just take a bunch of code and just move it onto this stuff, and it just works because the APIs are there and the frameworks are there, and so it's. I think for most customers, you're going to find that same stuff. That most of the stuff will just work.
It's like taking an old classic car and pulling out the engine and sticking an electric motor and a big battery. It's faster, quieter, more reliable.
Good analogy.
So one of the other things that you guys had on a big slide during the keynote that kind of fits in with all this, I think, just deserves just a brief touching point is ML.net. So what is that, and how do desktop developers start taking advantage of it?
Yeah, so ML.net came out of we were looking at the AI space. I mean, Microsoft all up. If you watch the keynote from Satya, there's lots of AI throughout all the keynotes. I mean, Google I/O was also this week, and they talked about AI quite a bit.
Yep.
We know AI is there. We've been asking ourselves, what's the right AI story for .NET developers? And it just happens to be that we had this internal tool that was written in .NET years and years ago that we use for the Office team uses it, the Bing team uses it, a variety of teams in Microsoft use it all over the place. We've been using it for years, and it's pretty good tech. Some of the Azure Machine Learning stuff used it as well. And we said, hey, what if we just took that stuff, open sourced it, and put it out there for .NET developers? Because we hear from .NET developers, like, how am I supposed to use AI? What should I do? What we're doing, it is a 0.1. So it's something that would probably RTM sometime early next year. The main reason even though it's a very robust and used internal library for a long time, it was currently written for people that know AI. And what we're trying to do before we actually RTM it is make it usable by regular developers like Mike and I. But the big thing is, I want to make sure I'm careful here, is a lot of data scientists use Python and R to build data models. I mean, to build ML models. And we're not trying to replace that. We're just saying that if there is a model and you want to consume it in .NET, there should be some awesome APIs that make that really simple to do.
Absolutely.
And you might actually be a .NET developer that wants to make your own model. We showed in the keynote, one of the demos that I did is we wrote a classifier that would take GitHub issues and automatically put them in the right path for you. We basically ran through 16,000 existing issues, and it got to read the title and the description of each of those issues.
It's pretty good because there's probably a lot of consistency there, I'm guessing.
There was. And we've done a couple of those things, and we want to make those kind of scenarios easy for .NET developers to do. There's a whole bunch of sessions that we did at Build this year on this, and the big thing I've been telling my team to focus on is I don't want to show cameras taking pictures of stuff and doing weird stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
But what do my developers? What is the regular developer going to do? We have a great example. We're building there's 4 of these that we did. We're releasing the source code for all of them. One of them is sentiment analysis. So let you know if there's a negative issue or a negative blog post or negative comments on your docs. Everybody's got something you might want to do that on. There's the classifying kind of stuff. So we're trying to put out some samples that actually we think would attract fit most developers.
That's very cool. So we talked about like the different versions, and I know there's like a whole bunch of different pieces to this. So like, what is available today, and then what will be available shortly, and what will be available down the road?
So in the .NET world, we shipped .NET Core 2.1 RC on Monday this week.
Yeah.
We plan to RTM that, I hope, by the end of the month.
Okay.
Based on the feedback from the RC, if it's good, it'll be the end of the month. If we need a little bit more time, maybe it rolls into the first or second week of June. For the .NET Core 3 stuff, everything we showed was real. So any demos that were shown were actually really, there's no fakery there at all. So you can see we have it working.
Yeah.
But the biggest things that we didn't show are using the new project system and making the designers work with the new project system. So there's some big gaps there that we still have to address. I hope to have a preview out by the end of the year.
Okay.
So from the Windows side, specifically related to .NET Core, there's a decent chunk of work to make WPF side-by-sideable. There's quite a bit of tendrils that has in the operating system because there's a very large native layer that's kind of underneath all the managed APIs. So there's a bunch of work that we're going to be we've been collaborating with Scott's team on making sure that work gets done. So that'll help us get to that preview. On the XAML Islands front, that is a API that will be shipping in the next update to Windows. So the one that's later 2018.
Okay.
Whatever the PR team will decide to call it, who knows?
Is it the October release now, since we can't say fall or spring?
Well, but they don't want to use that. They don't like months because then like, what if it misses the month? And they're just like it's
The next version.
it's seriously
The
like,
next.
We want to call it a season, but we can't call it a season because seasons are different in every part of the world.
If you
Right,
say
right.
fall, it's too North American. It's like, oh my goodness. So
Are we down to like Q3 or Q4?
that's how Harv, the VP PM who like kind of does a lot of the Windows planning. He's been calling him like first half 18, second half of 18. Or 19, whatever. But we'll see what they end up being called. Anyways, the one that will come out before December of 2018, sometime before that, will have the XAML Islands API inside of it. It will be a preview at that point. There's definitely a handful of issues and things to be aware of. Those control wrappers that I mentioned that will be targeted for the most common controls for WinForms and WPF. That's what I like to call the easy button for 2018. So that's what you should kind of stick with. To start to do custom controls or third-party controls, there's a bunch of other interesting caveats and gotchas. There's some things around localization and resource loading that we have to go solve. So that'll be something that we'll really nail in 2019, kind of in the wave of .NET Core 3. So those two things will kind of really reach a maturity level together. We're hoping next year. From the packaging front, we talked about MSIX packages. That'll definitely also be part of the .NET Core 3 project system. We also, for repackaging existing applications, we're taking the current desktop app converter and kind of injecting that with a big boost of both UI support, so you can have UI to package things, so you don't have to be a developer to kind of figure out the command line. And we're also adding this new packaging support framework to let you basically remap certain calls that an app might make in install time. That will, if it's putting, if an app or installer is putting things in certain locations in the OS that are particularly brittle and known to get stomped on by either OS updates or other apps, we can kind of help take care of that without having the code for an application. So we'll just take your existing MSI and kind of apply a packaging support framework to it inside of your MSIX. And so that's a new IT packaging tool that will be coming out. There'll be the first version of it this year. There'll be a really significant update to it next year as well. So that's kind of some of the big Windows
lots of good
platform
stuff in the
features
works.
coming through.
Very cool.
Is there anything else that you guys want to mention that we might not have talked about yet?
The only other one I would want to talk about is we showed another prototype in the talk, and that was Blazor, and that's some really cool tech that I hope to get a release out soon on, and that basically is being able to run WebAssembly, to run C# in the browser. So you basically can load .NET in the browser, and the example of Blazor that we showed was a web app where instead, what you normally would call JavaScript, you can just call C# instead.
Yeah.
And it's all run native. So it's got native perf. It runs in the sandbox of the browser. And so it's pretty awesome because you can write basically .NET on the client and the server. You don't require a JavaScript framework like Angular or React or Vue. And the programming that you know today just kind of works. And I've been able to do stuff with Blazor that I never would have thought I could do. It's like all the things you see the JavaScript guys do. Now I just write some C# and it just works, and I don't know why it works, but it just works. And it's amazing. So I think that's an exciting piece that we've been showing it for about 6 months now, and every time we show it, it gets a lot of attention. And so I, Google .NET and Blazor and try those bits out because they're pretty.
Yeah,
amazing.
we had a whole show on it, and it's kind of mind blowing what you can do with that. So it's really cool.
Yeah, I think WebAssembly is going to be absolutely huge.
And WebAssembly won't just be .NET. It'll be you're going to see Python, Go, Java. Everybody's going to be there. I think it's gonna. It's amazing. The browser's now kind of become the universal place where you have the sandbox. The app can run inside of. It can run all these different languages natively, and I think you're just going to build with the tech it's the best tech for the job.
Yeah.
I think it's really going to blur the lines between client and web programming.
I think it will.
I mean, they're already really blurring, but I think as soon as you have WebAssembly, you're going to be like, wait, what's running where now? And I think you're really going to start to.
I mean,
not worry
we've
about
had
it.
crazy conversations, Mike and I. What if you could run UWP in that? Well, then your UWP application runs inside of the browser on the Mac, on the iPhone, on the Android device. Boom! I mean, that's a combination of UWP controls plus Blazor.
Yeah.
So it's web, but it's enhanced with native controls. There's
just like mix and match like all the things that you want from like each technology. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So definitely, there's a lot of cool ideas we have and a lot of cool tech that we have that can be used and repurposed in interesting ways. And I think we have to go have some fun discussions about how to use things and how we want to align the strategy.
You should bring up open sourcing.
That's a good point too. Yeah. So So one question that you guys didn't mention, which a lot of customers have asked, which is, well, you're moving WinForms and WPF on top of .NET Core. I thought everything in .NET Core is open source. Are you open sourcing WinForms and WPF? It's a logical, set of jumps to make, and it is absolutely something that we're talking about internally.
Okay.
The kind of along the lines of some of the stuff I mentioned around WPF having that giant native layer, there is we have to figure out what's the right layer there, and that will a lot of that work will kind of go hand in hand with figuring out how to make it side by side, because really thinking about the decoupling it from the operating system is going to help us like figure out where that layer for open source would need to be. I definitely think it's another thing that because in the kind of new reorg universe with Scott and Jason, I think we're going to be a lot more responsive to customer requests and customer feedback, and pretty much the number one customer request if you go look at Feedback Hub or any place for WPF is please open source WPF.
Yeah.
So we want to listen to customers. We've heard them loud and clear. I think we just have to go now figure out the right way to respond to that.
Okay, that's very cool. Well, every time I talk to you guys, I get so excited about .NET. So thank you so much for coming on here and talking to us about all the great stuff that's going into there.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks. It's been a good conversation.